So, Patrick is an old colleague of mine. I worked with him at Pave. Also, a returning speaker to Data Debug. He is awesome. This is going to be another fantastic deep talk implementing practical how-tos. So, without further ado, just to keep an emphasis on time, Patrick.
So a few fun facts to get us started. My name is Patrick Old. I've been old my whole life, that's what I tell people. Second fun fact is that Sam and I worked together at LinkedIn, and he was very much so a mentor to me there. I was thinking of starting a startup like 8 or 9 months ago now, before I joined my most recent company. And I called Sam and I was like, hey, what do you think of this idea? And we just went back and forth on it. And he was telling me about dual flow and such, and these interactions that you can be having with these agents now. And it was really, really informative. So just know, I think that the conversation we just had is more of a look forward from someone who is deeply an expert. Me, myself, I currently lead data at a small cybersecurity company. It's around 50 people here. So I mainly operate as a data engineer, but do a bit of experimentation and analytics as needed, shall we say. But yeah, Sam and I worked at LinkedIn together and went on to Pave, created some data products there, focused on employee compensation, and now help derive insights on risks that people bring to the company by doing silly things like clicking on phishing emails, and help them not do that anymore by training the employees, right? What's really cool about Pave and Fable is that the products that I actually get to work on make the company money, right? By deriving insights on, hey, what is someone's best compensation we can pay them to help them stay longer at the company, or hey, what is the human risk that is added at your organization? These are data problems that we actually get paid for, which is very different than when I worked at large organizations such as LinkedIn, which is a focus on internal dashboards or internal insights to help people do better at their job, if you will. What I wanted to talk to you about today are maybe some more basic concepts that are seen in data engineering that will help you sane if you have to deal with pipelines. I found that over the last 6 or 7 years that I've been working in data, it's easy to just lose your mind. There's so much going on in some of these pipelines that we're asked to control. I don't know if anybody else can empathize with that fact, but it's a challenging job. So much so that we're, as Sam said, I think we're either getting fired or asked to do new things. But there's a lot going on, and what I've found is that you can come at this from a higher level approach of understanding some basic patterns that you and your team can follow. It will help you make decisions in the future. Let us dive in, and please interrupt me at any time. This placeholder image, I was like, this dude works in San Francisco. There's no way that these people don't work here. And so again, right, we have all this complexity, and it's always growing, and teams are always changing. My boss just left. He brought me in, and then he's like, peace out. I'm like, dude, that is not what I asked for. And I'm stuck answering questions like, hey, why is this number different than this number, right? And we've all been there before, and it's like, man, that's such a great question that is so simple yet so hard to answer. And so by following some patterns, I've been able to help with this. I'll get into those in a moment here, but personally, what I've seen in my last couple of roles is ginormous DBT pipelines. And feel free to tell me if that's a terrible thing, because it feels terrible. Personally, we're working with hundreds of models and some pipelines, doing some of the ingestion work that Sam has said is largely automated away now from us, fortunately, to get into that bronze layer. But I see things that are really add a lot of complexity, right? We lack consistent naming conventions. There's this drift that's always happening. People are responsible for different parts of the pipeline because this thing freaking grows crazy amounts, and you just say all right, you did that last time. You just please go do it again, right? But the problem's not tooling. It's this complexity, and this complexity often happens due to a lack of patterns that are followed and instantiated at companies. So this sounds like a ad for a pharmaceutical, something my line is sorry. Patterns will make your life easier. I feel like I just heard it on TV. So funny. When Sam and I were at LinkedIn, we were at an on-site. We had on-sites because our team was mostly remote, but that only kind of held true because I was told to come back to the office, and then no one else came back to the office, and I was like, why did I move to California if no one's going to be in the office? I hear some laughs because I think people have been there before. But when we were there, Sam and I at LinkedIn, one of our tech leads pulled us all into a room. It's like, hey guys, we're going to do this thing called like Medallion, bronze, silver, gold. And I was like, this guy doesn't know. Like, he's just making up words. Like, I don't understand this. And it turns out it came up again and came up again and came up again. And I've actually found a lot of value in it, so much so that in architecting our pipelines at Fable, where I currently work from 0 to 1, I laid everything in this foundation. Now, this is a current look at Medallion. What Sam gave a preview to is very much so forward thinking. I think it's really, really wonderful. I think it provides us great insight into maybe what our futures will look like. But this is what I see day to day, right? Landing our raw data, having some transformations going on in silver, and then we're going to be placing our analytics external products in gold. Okay, this sounds very basic. It actually is very basic, which is the wonderful thing about it, right? Because this helps me understand, okay, when I build this pipeline, like I'm going to have these patterns that I follow, and every table is going to fall into these groups. It also really helps with like, you know, where am I going to be doing this like kind of filtering? Like, where can these external teams actually get their data, right? I'm not going to be exposing these earlier layers unless there's some specific use case for it. I know exactly what I'm able to provide these teams for them to answer their questions, instead of like, well, we have a lot of company data, or like we have a lot of employee data, like we have a lot of like transaction data, like, oh yeah, just go look at the data, right? Like it becomes way too broad if you don't have it bucketed properly like this. It makes our lives a lot easier. Okay, let's see here. Number 2, along these lines, as someone who's actually working in these pipelines, right, I need standard conventions, because if I'm going to look for something amongst these hundreds of DBT models, if I'm going to look for like company data or employee data or transaction data, there's so many different places that this actually exists, right? So maybe I actually need standards that I'm following, that I'm going to continually hammer myself and my teammates on, like, hey, make sure we follow these so we can do our job really, really effectively. You have some basic ones here. I think what's really interesting is I was making these lists of things that I've seen, and I really don't like most of these names. I don't know about you guys, but like I think stage and raw, like this one, I think I can like get some agreement on, of like we're landing some raw data in. Intermediate tables, because you're not really supposed to be querying data there, and it's kind of a step in the right direction with some transformations. It's a snapshot, okay, like you've done some filtering, etc. Complete, because you're going to filter down from it later. These are some things that I've seen, but you also have like dimension tables, you have fact tables, product, base, core, analytics. Like it just goes on and on, right? This can explode. I would actually like to pause. Does anybody have any that they want to add to this list? Right? They're saying that, oh, I don't see this like prefix up here that I see all the time.
Only suffixes, just underscore
Underscore
daily.
daily. Okay. Yes, historical, underscore historical. Latest, that's another one as well. Right. Final. Oh God, please, no, please, no. Final 2.
Oh, just versioning it the date, that's it.
Yeah. That's the worst, right? Like Feb 1, 2022. It's like, can we delete this, guys? Right? Let's have some standards in place so we don't run into those situations, right? That's what we want to actively avoid. So what I recommend, and I'll get to this in a moment though, is like just write these down. It sounds very simple, but like that's how you can actually get agreement amongst team members of like, okay, this is what we follow at this company, right? And you can have a definition of like what a staging table is, right? What an intermediate table is, right? And then if you ever see an intermediate table arise in a dashboard when you realize it should be something that's from the gold layer, like a product table, you can go to those teammates and say, hey, this is the raw data we're exposing, right? It becomes very, very clear and much easier for us to follow these patterns and do our jobs effectively. Last one, very important, and it's a little bit less technical, shall we say, is how you interact with other teams, right? What are your patterns for interaction so they can draw expectations from you and your team members of what can they get from working with the data team, right? This looks like, yeah, you can define SLAs and like data contracts with your downstream teams. That's very, very important because they need to know like the schema and data that they're going to be ingesting, but also communication standards, right? These are things that are very, very helpful for data teams to have patterns on as well. And then being diligent, I think, is probably the most underrated thing that I've seen in the last like 6 years that I've been in industry. There have been times when I've been at companies where data hasn't refreshed for like 45 days and just like nobody decided to say anything about it. And like a test was failing, but it looked like it was a different test that was failing. So they just like were like, oh yeah, we were aware that that test fails, and they looked a little deeper and things are wrong, right? But I think that you need to hold yourself to a high standard of looking through the pipeline end to end, and being someone who is responsible and diligent will bring you a long ways in your career. I truly have found that it is probably the most helpful trait that I often bring to organizations, because I end up finding bugs that people just never really would look for, right? And if you can really act like an owner, it will make your product a lot better. How do you bring this to your organization? You have your longer term patterns of writing these things down, right? Your standard, whatever you're using, Confluence, I hope not, but Confluence, and Notion, go Notion, and maybe other places of documentation. But go through the formal RFC process with your team members on these standards of, hey, what are we going to name these tables? What are we going to be doing about sharing patterns with them as well? That's like the best way that I've found to gain emphasis on, hey, how can we come together and agree upon these standards that we're going to continue to operate by. I've just found these things to be extremely useful, so I thought I would come and share them with you all today. That's it from me. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
What's your recommendation for like the line between software engineering and data engineering? For example, like you're on your team, and it's the PM says like, oh, it might be easier to just, or whoever says it might be easier to just create this event and then put it in the database, and then you can search it in post on. You don't need a data engineer for that.
Yeah.
But maybe you do. Like, what's the line between like something that a D would take care of properly versus what is like a quick kind of not efficient, but a quick way of being able to sort of like do this without having it eventually become technical.
Yeah, that's. I want to answer that, but I also want to ask everybody else too, like, because I do interact with this on the day to day. Does anybody else interact with this on the day to day? I have it all the time, right? So we have a downstream suite team and an upstream suite team somehow for data ingestion and then actually servicing it to our application, right? Because Fable, what we do is we actually service these insights to our customers about the data, again, how we make some money. Where I personally draw the line is that personally, if it's in a data pipeline, I think that someone with a data expertise should probably be owning it, just in a general rule. If it's a one-off thing, it doesn't have to be that way. Once data is beginning to be like surfaced to an application and there's an API like hitting it, maybe the data team can be responsible for like the API endpoints of like surfacing data to there, but not actually writing the endpoint itself. That's my experience with it. So I'm writing the DBT pipeline at my company. We also work with ingestion. I end up doing that a fair amount, but a lot of software teams end up doing ingestion. And I've seen it at many places where previously it was a software team that handled all ingestion, and then consolidation of like, hey, here's all these people's like information that we're getting from all these different sources. So I've seen it done both ways, and I always look at that and I'm like, isn't that data engineering work? Like personally, that's how I end up feeling about it. Thank you all for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it.